David, stay with us. We have breaking news coming in from the US. The American military has cancelled a major training exercise for an elite unit of paratroopers, fueling speculation that Trump is planning to invade Iran. Yes, breaking news coming in. I repeat it again. The American military has cancelled a major training exercise for an elite unit of paratroopers, fueling speculation that Trump is planning to invade Iran. Well, the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg in North Carolina has been told to cancel a training event at Fort Polk in Louisiana and stay at their base instead. A Washington Post report quotes officials saying, and I quote it here again, "We're all preparing for something just in case." US President Donald Trump had earlier asserted that American troops won't be needed on ground, but in recent days, the tone has been slowly changing in the Pentagon and Washington. The 82nd Airborne Division specializes in parachute assault, and its brigade combat has a team of between 4,000 to 5,000 soldiers specializing in ground combat, which is said to be ready to deploy on 18 hours' notice for missions. And just moments ago, White House Press Secretary Leavitt announced that the American military campaign against Iran is expected to take as long as 4 to 6 weeks. This is what Washington has said. David, I'd like to come back to you. In an interview, Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Majid Takht Ravanchi said, and I'm quoting it here again, "We do not trust the Americans. Not only did they betray us, but they betrayed diplomacy." At the same time, Iran's parliament speaker the speaker has also used combative language, saying Iran's future will be decided by Iranians and not by what he called Epstein's gang. What do you make of such kind of direct messaging from top Iranian leaders?
Well, it's rather ironic coming from a regime official to be talking about the future of Iran being decided by the Iranian people. This is a regime that is anything but democratic. It has brutally put down its own people who have been demanding changes and demanding the realization of their rights. So the idea that his regime represents the will of the Iranian people is flatly absurd.
Well, Israel also says its strikes, including those in Beirut targeting Hezbollah-linked infrastructure, are aimed at security threats, while Iran frames the conflict as aggression imposed by the US and Israel. From a media monitoring standpoint, what indicators tell you which narrative is gaining more traction globally?
Well, in many ways, with the way the world of information has fragmented over the years, it can really depend on which bubble one resides in. I think, going back to what I said earlier, with Iran lashing out at everyone in the region, firing missiles and drones towards Arab countries in the Gulf, towards Jordan, Turkey, Azerbaijan, attacking shipping in the Strait. The narrative of Iran being the victim here is probably not gaining very much traction. There's growing support for the US and Israeli operation. There's growing indications some of the Arab countries might even join in the operation, which would be quite unprecedented for an Arab country to be fighting a war on the same side as Israel. But Iran has successfully brought us to a moment where that is a real possibility, showing that its narrative about US and Israel being the threat is not gaining the traction it certainly would like.
David, now we just said that the American military has cancelled a major training exercise for an elite unit of paratroopers. Your thoughts on this?
Well, the military needs to be prepared for anything. War, and certainly war in the Middle East, can be very unpredictable. One thing I would note is that this military operation has been unprecedented in many ways. And this is to say that I do not think a ground operation, at least involving substantial numbers of U.S. forces, is likely. It's an operation designed very differently than past military operations. To put it in context, the pace of airstrikes in the opening day by just the U.S. forces alone was nearly twice the pace of U.S. airstrikes during the opening day of the shock and awe campaign against Saddam Hussein's Iraq in 2003. Now, bear in mind that Israeli forces dropped even more munitions on that opening day. And there's very clear signs that the design of the air campaign so far is already having a strong effect. There are growing reports of Iranian forces not showing up to their posts. There's growing signs of fragmentation within the Iranian regime. And so I think the necessity of a ground operation, while one must always be careful about predictions, I don't foresee it ending up being necessary. And I don't necessarily think that the position of Donald Trump, what he would like to see out of this operation, would necessitate a ground operation.
David, now, if Israel claims to have destroyed most of Iran's air defenses and a majority of its missile launchers, yet Iran continues to launch missiles and issue threats against Dimona, which is the nuclear facility, what does that tell us about the remaining depth of Iran's military capacity? And can Iran still impose costs on the US and Israel?
Absolutely. Its ability to substantially fire missiles or drones at the rate it did on the first day has been dramatically eroded, but that doesn't mean it can't still cause pain. The missiles it has, for example, its medium-range ballistic missiles, the ones that are capable of reaching a place like Israel, it's probably down to somewhere perhaps around 1,000. Its number of launchers has been significantly eroded, but all it takes is one missile to get through air defenses and hit the right target for chaos to be caused. Fortunately, air defenses so far, both in Israel and in the Gulf countries and by U.S. bases, has been fairly successful. There's only been about a dozen strikes, for example, in Israel. Unfortunately, there's been about 13 casualties there. There have been a number of casualties in some of the Gulf Arab countries as well. And certainly the ability to cause economic and political harm is still there, which is probably the Iranian regime's main strategy at this point, knowing it cannot defeat the U.S. militarily, but it can try to pressure the U.S. through political and economic costs, which fits with Iran's stature as a leading state sponsor of terrorism, that it is essentially resorting to a strategy of terrorism, holding the world hostage, threatening shipping, threatening oil, threatening economic centers, and attacking them in order to try to get what it wants.
Well, thank you, David, for making time for us and breaking this down for us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.